The American dream has always been about transformation. The idea that in this country, it doesn't matter where you come from, but where you're willing to go. But what happens when that dream seems impossible, when poverty, discrimination, and language barriers create walls that seem insurmountable? This is the true story of Thomas Rodriguez, a 16-year-old boy who arrived in Detroit with nothing but the clothes on his back and a determination that would not be broken. From sleeping in abandoned buildings to building skyscrapers, from collecting garbage to employing thousands of people, Thomas's journey proves that sometimes the greatest success stories begin with the most impossible circumstances. This is a story of 30 years of struggle, sacrifice, and an unwavering belief that hard work and integrity can overcome any obstacle. Chapter 1. Thomas Rodriguez's journey to the American dream began on a scorching hot morning in August 1985, when he crossed the Rio Grande into Texas with nothing but a backpack containing 2 changes of clothes, a worn photograph of his deceased parents, and $17 in crumpled bills. He was 16 years old, spoke no English, and had no idea that his destination, Detroit, Michigan, was over 1,000 miles away from the Mexican border. Thomas had been born in a small village outside Guadalajara, Mexico, where his father worked as a farmhand and his mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in the city. Life had been hard but stable until a drought destroyed the crops and economic collapse eliminated the jobs that had sustained their community for generations. When Thomas was 14, his parents died in a bus accident while traveling to find work in Mexico City, leaving him alone with no family and no future in a country that seemed to offer nothing but poverty and despair. For 2 years, Thomas had survived on the streets of Guadalajara, working odd jobs, sleeping in doorways, and dreaming of the stories he had heard about America, a place where hard work was rewarded, where a man could build a life through determination and effort, where the circumstances of your birth didn't determine the limits of your potential. The journey from Mexico to Detroit took Thomas 3 months and nearly killed him twice. He rode freight trains, walked hundreds of miles, worked in fields for food and shelter, and learned to survive on his wits and an unshakable belief that somewhere ahead lay the opportunity he was seeking. When he finally arrived in Detroit in November 1985, the city was in the midst of an economic collapse that had left entire neighborhoods abandoned and thousands of people unemployed. Detroit in 1985 was a city that had lost over half its population in the previous 20 years. The automotive industry that had once made it the pride of American manufacturing was hemorrhaging jobs to foreign competition and automation. Entire city blocks stood empty, their windows boarded up, and their streets littered with the debris of abandoned dreams. For most people, Detroit represented the end of the American industrial age. For Thomas Rodriguez, it represented possibility. Thomas's first night in Detroit was spent in an abandoned warehouse on the city's east side, where he shared space with a dozen other homeless people who had been defeated by circumstances that Thomas was determined to overcome. The November cold cut through his thin jacket like a knife, and as he lay on a piece of cardboard trying to stay warm, Thomas made a promise to himself that would define the rest of his life. He would never sleep on the street again, and he would build something permanent and meaningful with his hands and his determination. The next morning, Thomas began walking through the city, looking for any kind of work that would allow him to earn money and begin building a life. His inability to speak English made most jobs impossible, but Thomas had learned during his journey from Mexico that there were certain kinds of work that required more strength and determination than language skills. After 3 days of searching, Thomas found his first American job with the City of Detroit's sanitation department. The work was brutal, collecting garbage from neighborhoods where even the garbage trucks were targets for theft and vandalism, working 10-hour shifts in weather that ranged from blazing summer heat to winter cold that seemed to freeze everything it touched. The pay was $4.50 per hour, just above minimum wage, but for Thomas, it represented the first step toward the life he was determined to build. Thomas's co-workers were a mixture of men who had been broken by life and men who were grinding their way towards something better. There was Marcus Williams, a 50-year-old African-American man who had been collecting garbage for 22 years and had put 3 children through college on his sanitation worker's salary. There was Jerry Kowalski, a Polish immigrant who had arrived in Detroit in 1963 and was saving money to bring his elderly mother to America. And there was Carlos Mendez, a Mexican-American who had been born in Detroit but who took Thomas under his wing and began teaching him English during their lunch breaks. "Tommy," Carlos said during Thomas's first week on the job, using the American version of his name that would stick for the rest of his life, "this job isn't about the garbage. This job is about learning the city, learning the people, and figuring out where the opportunities are. If you pay attention, you'll see things that other people miss." Carlos was right. As Thomas spent his days driving through every neighborhood in Detroit, he began to see patterns that others overlooked. He noticed which neighborhoods were being abandoned and which ones were being renovated. He saw which buildings were being torn down and which ones were being restored. Most importantly, he began to notice the construction crews that were working throughout the city, and he started to understand that construction was one of the few industries in Detroit that was still growing and still offering opportunities for men who were willing to work hard. Every day during his lunch break, Thomas would park the garbage truck near construction sites and watch the workers. He studied how they mixed concrete, how they laid foundations, how they erected steel beams and installed electrical systems. He couldn't understand the words they were speaking, but he could understand the work, and he began to see that construction was something he could learn if he was given the opportunity. Thomas lived in a boarding house on Detroit's southwest side, in a neighborhood populated mostly by Mexican and Central American immigrants who had come to the city seeking the same opportunities that had drawn Thomas from his homeland. His room was 8 feet by 10 feet, barely large enough for a bed and a small dresser, but it was warm, it was safe, and most importantly, it was his. He paid $60 per week for the room, leaving him with about $100 per week for food, clothing, and the savings that he was determined to accumulate. Every night after work, Thomas would study English using books he had borrowed from the Detroit Public Library and tapes he had bought at a used bookstore. He would practice construction vocabulary by reading trade magazines that workers had thrown away at job sites. He would save every penny he could, dreaming of the day when he would have enough money to buy the tools that would allow him to move from collecting garbage to building something permanent and valuable. But Thomas's determination was tested every day by the discrimination and prejudice that seemed to be woven into the fabric of American life. Store clerks would speak to him slowly and loudly, as if his inability to speak perfect English meant that he was deaf or stupid. Police officers would stop him regularly, demanding to see identification and asking questions about his immigration status. Co-workers would make jokes about wetbacks and illegals, not knowing or caring that Thomas was working legally and paying taxes on every dollar he earned. The worst incident came during Thomas's 3rd month in Detroit, when he was walking home from work and was attacked by 3 men who told him to go back to Mexico, where you belong. Thomas fought back with the strength and desperation of someone who had come too far to be defeated by ignorance and hatred. But the beating left him with a broken nose, 2 cracked ribs, and a renewed determination to prove that he belonged in America as much as anyone else. "Tommy," Marcus Williams said, when Thomas returned to work with his face still swollen from the attack, "there's going to be people in this country who will never accept you, no matter what you accomplish or how hard you work. The question is whether you're going to let their hatred define your life, or whether you're going to use it as fuel to build something they can't tear down." Thomas chose to use the hatred as fuel. Every insult, every act of discrimination, every attempt to make him feel like he didn't belong became motivation to work harder, save more money, and move closer to his goal of building something permanent and meaningful with his life. After 8 months of collecting garbage and studying construction, Thomas had saved nearly $3,000, more money than he had ever possessed in his life, but still far short of what he would need to buy the tools and equipment necessary to start his own construction business. He was beginning to understand that moving from garbage collection to construction would require not just money and determination, but also the kind of opportunity that might never come if he waited for someone else to provide it. It was then that Thomas made a decision that would change the trajectory of his entire life. Instead of continuing to save money while working for the sanitation department, he would take the risk of quitting his stable job and pursuing construction work, even if it meant starting at the bottom and working for wages that were lower than what he was earning collecting garbage. The opportunity came in the form of a conversation Thomas overheard at a construction site during his lunch break. The foreman, a gruff Italian-American named Tony Rossini, was complaining to another worker that he couldn't find reliable laborers who were willing to work for the wages he could afford to pay on a small residential renovation project. Thomas walked up to Tony Rossini and, in his still limited English, said, "Mr. Rossini, I work hard. I learn fast. I need job in construction." Tony looked at this young Mexican man who was still wearing his garbage collector's uniform and saw something that made him willing to take a chance. "Kid, can you be here tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock with work boots and gloves?" "Yes, sir, I be here. The pay is $3 an hour, and if you can't keep up, you're gone after 1 day." "I keep up, Mr. Rossini. I work hard." Thomas Rodriguez was about to begin the second phase of his journey toward the American dream. Chapter 2. Thomas Rodriguez's first day as a construction worker began at 5:30 a.m. on a cold Monday morning in April 1986, when he arrived at the job site an hour and a half early, carrying a lunch that consisted of 2 bologna sandwiches and a thermos of coffee, wearing work boots that he had bought with his last $20 and clothes that he had washed and pressed the night before. Tony Rossini arrived at 6:45 a.m. to find Thomas already walking around the job site, studying the plans and trying to understand what the day's work would involve. "Jesus, kid," Tony said, shaking his head with what might have been admiration or disbelief. "You know we don't start until 7 o'clock, right?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Rossini. I want to understand the work before we start." The job was a complete renovation of a 2-story house in one of Detroit's neighborhoods that was slowly being revitalized by young professionals who were buying old homes and restoring them to their original condition. The work would involve everything from foundation repair to roof replacement, and Tony's crew consisted of just 4 men. Tony himself, 2 experienced workers named Mike and Danny, and now Thomas. Thomas's first assignment was to dig a foundation trench by hand. 8 hours of backbreaking work with a shovel in clay soil that seemed to fight back against every attempt to move it. The work was harder than anything Thomas had done during his months collecting garbage, but he attacked it with an intensity that impressed even the experienced construction workers who were watching him. "Hey, Tony," Mike said during the lunch break, "where did you find this kid? He's been digging for 4 hours straight and he hasn't slowed down once." "I don't know where he came from," Tony replied, "but I know I want to keep him." But Thomas wasn't just working hard, he was also learning. During every break, he would ask questions about the tools, the materials, and the techniques that the other workers were using. His English was still limited, but his questions were intelligent and showed that he was thinking about the work, not just doing it. "Mr. Tony," Thomas said during his second week on the job, "why we use this cement instead of that cement?" "Well, kid, this is Portland cement, which is stronger and lasts longer than regular cement. It costs more, but when you're building something that needs to last, you use the best materials you can afford." Thomas absorbed every piece of information like a sponge soaking up water. He learned about different types of wood, various grades of steel, the properties of different concrete mixtures, and the tools and techniques that separated professional construction work from amateur attempts. More importantly, he learned about the business side of construction, how to estimate costs, how to schedule work, and how to deal with suppliers and customers. After 3 months working for Tony Rossini, Thomas had proven himself to be not just a reliable laborer, but a valuable member of the crew. His work was consistently excellent. He never missed a day, and he had developed enough English skills to communicate effectively with customers and suppliers. Tony raised his pay to $4 per hour and began teaching him more specialized skills like plumbing, electrical work, and finish carpentry. But Thomas's real education came from watching Tony manage the business side of construction. He observed how Tony bid on jobs, how he dealt with customers who wanted to change their plans in the middle of a project, and how he handled the dozens of small problems that arose on every construction job. Thomas began to understand that successful construction work required not just physical skills, but also business intelligence, customer relations, and the ability to solve problems quickly and efficiently. "Tommy," Tony said one evening as they were cleaning up the job site, "you're learning this business faster than anyone I've ever worked with. Have you ever thought about getting your contractor's license and starting your own company?" Thomas had thought about it every day since he had started working construction, but he also understood how much he still needed to learn and how much money he would need to accumulate before he could take that step. "Mr. Tony, I think about it all the time, but I need to learn more, and I need to save more money." "Well, kid, you keep working like this, and you'll get there. And when you do, you can count on me for advice and maybe some work referrals." Thomas continued working for Tony Rossini for another year, but he was also working 2 additional jobs to accelerate his savings and learning. 3 nights per week, he worked as a janitor at an office building downtown, earning an additional $15 per night. On weekends, he worked with a painting crew that specialized in residential work, earning $50 per day while learning another valuable construction skill. By working 3 jobs and living as frugally as possible, Thomas was able to save nearly $200 per week, money that he deposited in a savings account at a small bank in southwest Detroit, where the teller, Maria Gonzalez, had become the first person to encourage Thomas's dreams of business ownership. "Thomas," Maria said during one of his weekly visits to make a deposit, "you're saving more money than people who make 3 times as much as you do. Have you thought about what you're going to do with all this money?" "Miss Maria, I'm going to start my own construction company. I'm going to build houses and buildings that will still be standing when my grandchildren are grown up." "Thomas, I believe you will. And when you're ready to start that company, come talk to me about a business loan. This bank likes to help people who work as hard as you do." It was during his 2nd year working for Tony Rossini that Thomas met the woman who would become his wife and business partner. Elena Morales was a secretary at a legal office downtown, but she was also taking night classes in business administration at Wayne State University. She was intelligent, ambitious, and shared Thomas's belief that hard work and education could overcome any obstacle. Thomas and Elena met at a community center dance in southwest Detroit, and their relationship developed slowly based on shared values and mutual respect rather than just physical attraction. Elena spoke both English and Spanish fluently, and she helped Thomas improve his language skills while he taught her about construction and business management. "Thomas," Elena said during their 6th month of dating, "you have a dream, and you have a plan to achieve that dream. But you also need someone who understands business and can help you manage the financial side of your company. I want to be part of what you're building." Thomas and Elena were married in September 1988. in a small ceremony at St. Anne's Catholic Church in southwest Detroit. Their honeymoon was a 3-day trip to Chicago, where they spent their time visiting construction sites and studying different building techniques and architectural styles. By the time of his marriage, Thomas had saved over $15,000 and had learned enough about construction to handle almost any residential project. He had also obtained his contractor's license and was beginning to take on small jobs during his evenings and weekends, building a reputation for quality work and reliability that was spreading throughout Detroit's immigrant communities. But Thomas's real breakthrough came when Tony Rossini was offered a large commercial project that was too big for his small crew to handle alone. Instead of turning down the job or subcontracting it to a larger company, Tony offered to make Thomas a partner in the project, giving him the opportunity to manage part of the work and learn about commercial construction. "Tommy," Tony said, "this job is worth $40,000, and it's going to require us to hire additional workers and rent heavy equipment. I'm willing to make you a full partner on this project if you can invest $5,000 and take responsibility for managing the foundation and structural work." Thomas looked at Tony, understanding that this was the opportunity he had been working toward for 3 years. $5,000 represented 1/3 of his total savings, and if the project failed, he would lose everything he had worked to accumulate. But if the project succeeded, he would have the experience and the reputation necessary to start his own construction company. "Mr. Tony, I accept your offer. When do we start?" The commercial project was the renovation of a small office building in downtown Detroit, and it would prove to be the most challenging and educational experience of Thomas's construction career. The work required coordinating with city inspectors, managing a crew of 8 workers, and solving engineering problems that were far more complex than anything Thomas had encountered in residential construction. But Thomas approached the commercial project with the same intensity and attention to detail that had characterized all of his work since arriving in America. He arrived at the job site every morning at 6 a.m. and stayed until the work was finished, regardless of how long that took. He studied engineering manuals at night, learning about load-bearing calculations and structural engineering principles. Most importantly, he treated every worker on the crew with respect and insisted on the same high standards that he demanded of himself. The project was completed on time and under budget, earning Thomas and Tony a reputation for reliability and quality that would lead to additional commercial contracts. More importantly for Thomas, the project had given him the confidence and experience necessary to start his own construction company. What do you think about Thomas's journey so far? Would you have had the courage to invest your life savings in a single construction project, knowing that failure could mean losing everything you had worked for? Let us know in the comments what you think about Thomas's willingness to take such enormous risks in pursuit of his dreams. Chapter 3. In January 1989, Thomas Rodriguez took the biggest risk of his life when he used his remaining savings to purchase a used pickup truck, a basic set of construction tools, and liability insurance for Rodriguez Construction Company, a business that existed only in his dreams and on the business license that hung in the small apartment he shared with Elena in southwest Detroit. The decision to start his own company hadn't been easy. Thomas was earning steady money working for Tony Rossini, and Elena was making good progress toward her business degree while working full-time as a legal secretary. They had a comfortable life, a growing savings account, and the security that came from stable employment. Starting a construction company would mean giving up that security and betting everything on Thomas's belief that he could succeed in one of the most competitive and unforgiving industries in America. "Elena," Thomas said on the night before he was scheduled to quit his job with Tony, "are you sure we should do this? If I fail, we could lose everything." Elena looked at her husband with the confidence that had made him fall in love with her 3 years earlier. "Thomas, the only way you can fail is if you don't try. You've learned everything you can learn working for someone else. Now it's time to build something that belongs to us. Rodriguez Construction Company's first project was a bathroom renovation for Mrs. Catherine O'Brien, an elderly Irish woman who lived in the same neighborhood where Thomas and Eleanor had their apartment. Mrs. O'Brien had seen Thomas working on various projects in the neighborhood and had heard from other residents that he was honest, reliable, and did excellent work. "Mr. Rodriguez," Mrs. O'Brien said when Thomas came to give her an estimate, "I don't have a lot of money, but I need this bathroom fixed properly. Can you do the work for $300? Thomas looked at the bathroom, which needed new plumbing, new tile, and complete electrical rewiring. The materials alone would cost nearly $200, leaving him with barely enough profit to justify the week of work the project would require. But Thomas also understood that this first project would either establish his reputation or destroy it before his company could get started. "Mrs. O'Brien, I can do the work for $300, and I guarantee that it will be done right." Thomas spent 10 days renovating Mrs. O'Brien's bathroom, working from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, installing new plumbing that would last for decades and tile work that was as beautiful as anything found in the most expensive homes in Detroit. When the project was finished, Mrs. O'Brien was so impressed that she called her sister, her neighbors, and everyone she knew at St. Bridget's Catholic Church to tell them about the young Mexican man who did incredible work for reasonable prices. Rodriguez Construction Company's second project came from Mrs. O'Brien's recommendation, and the third project came from the second customer's recommendation. Within 6 months, Thomas had more work than he could handle alone, and he was facing a decision about whether to remain a one-man operation or to expand by hiring additional workers. The decision was made for him when he was offered a project that would either establish Rodriguez Construction as a serious company or would destroy his business through failure. The project was the complete renovation of a small apartment building in downtown Detroit, work that would require a crew of at least 6 workers and would take 4 months to complete. The contract was worth $25,000, more money than Thomas had ever seen, but it also required him to post a performance bond and to complete the work according to specifications that were far more complex than anything he had previously undertaken. "Thomas," Eleanor said as they reviewed the contract together, "this project could make our company, or it could ruin us. Are you confident that you can handle work this large and this complex?" Thomas studied the plans and specifications, understanding that the project would test every skill he had learned during his 4 years in construction. The work would require expertise in electrical systems, plumbing, carpentry, and project management, and any major mistake could result in financial losses that would destroy their company and their personal savings. "Elena, I think I can do this work, but I'm going to need help. I'm going to need to hire experienced workers, and I'm going to need to rent equipment that we can't afford to buy. It's a huge risk. But if we succeed, Rodriguez Construction will be established as a real company." Thomas spent 2 weeks recruiting a crew for the apartment building project, looking for workers who shared his commitment to quality and reliability. He hired Miguel Santos, an experienced electrician who had recently immigrated from El Salvador, James Washington, an African-American carpenter who had been laid off when the automotive industry downsized, Maria Lopez, a skilled painter who was one of the few women working in construction in Detroit, and Carlos Rivera, a young man from Thomas's neighborhood who was eager to learn construction skills. The apartment building renovation began in March 1990 and immediately presented challenges that tested every aspect of Thomas's growing business skills. The building was older than the plans had indicated, requiring structural repairs that hadn't been included in the original budget. The electrical system was more complex than expected, requiring additional materials and labor that threatened to eliminate any profit from the project. Most challenging of all, Thomas discovered that some of his competitors were spreading rumors about Rodriguez Construction, suggesting that a Mexican immigrant couldn't possibly handle such a large and complex project. "Boss," Miguel Santos said during the second month of the project, "I've been hearing things around town. Some of the other contractors are saying that we're going to fail, and they're trying to convince our suppliers to stop giving us credit." Thomas had expected this kind of resistance from competitors who resented his success and who were threatened by his growing reputation. But he had also prepared for it by building relationships with suppliers who had seen the quality of his work and who trusted his commitment to paying his bills. "Miguel, let them talk. We're going to finish this project on time, under budget, and better than anyone expected. And when we do, everyone in Detroit will know that Rodriguez Construction can handle any job." The apartment building project became a test of not just Thomas's construction skills, but also his leadership abilities. Managing a crew of 6 workers required skills that he had never needed as a one-man operation. The ability to coordinate different trades, to solve problems quickly, and to maintain morale when challenges seemed overwhelming. But Thomas approached project management with the same intensity and attention to detail that had characterized all of his work since arriving in America. He created detailed schedules that kept all trades working efficiently without interfering with each other. He solved problems by consulting with experts and by applying the engineering principles he had learned through studying technical manuals. Most importantly, he treated every worker on his crew with respect and paid them fairly, creating a team that was committed to the success of the project. The apartment building renovation was completed 3 weeks ahead of schedule and $2,000 under budget. The quality of the work was so impressive that the building owner recommended Rodriguez Construction to other property managers throughout Detroit, and within 6 months, Thomas had contracts for 3 additional apartment building renovations. But success brought new challenges that Thomas hadn't anticipated. Managing multiple projects simultaneously required organizational skills that went far beyond construction knowledge. Coordinating schedules, managing cash flow, and maintaining quality control across several job sites demanded a level of business sophistication that Thomas was still developing. "Thomas," Elena said as she reviewed the company's financial statements, "we're making good money, but we're also growing faster than we can manage. We need to hire an office manager. We need better bookkeeping systems. And we need to establish credit lines that will allow us to take on larger projects." Elena was right, and her business education was becoming as valuable to Rodriguez Construction as Thomas's construction skills. She took over the company's financial management, establishing relationships with banks and suppliers that would support the company's continued growth. She also handled customer relations and project scheduling, allowing Thomas to focus on the technical aspects of construction while ensuring that the business side of the company was managed professionally. By the end of 1991, Rodriguez Construction employed 12 full-time workers and had annual revenues of over $200,000. Thomas had moved his family to a modest house in a middle-class neighborhood, and Elena had given birth to their first child, Maria Elena Rodriguez, who would grow up watching her father build an empire, one project at a time. But Thomas's success had also attracted attention from people who were determined to prevent a Mexican immigrant from succeeding in what they considered to be their territory. The harassment began with anonymous phone calls threatening violence if Rodriguez Construction didn't stop bidding on certain projects. It escalated to vandalism of job sites and equipment, and it reached a climax when someone set fire to Thomas's truck while it was parked outside his home. "Thomas," Detective Robert Murphy of the Detroit Police Department said, after investigating the truck fire, "we think this is connected to the harassment you've been receiving. Do you have any idea who might be behind these attacks?" Thomas had his suspicions, but he also understood that accusing competitors without proof would only make the situation worse. Detective Murphy, I just want to do good work and build a successful business. I don't want trouble with anyone. Mr. Rodriguez, these people are trying to intimidate you into giving up. Are you going to let them succeed? Thomas looked at Detective Murphy with the same determination that had carried him from the streets of Guadalajara to the construction sites of Detroit. Detective, I didn't come to America to give up. I came here to build something permanent and meaningful. No one is going to stop me from achieving that goal. The attacks on Rodriguez Construction only strengthened Thomas's resolve to succeed. Instead of being intimidated, he used the harassment as motivation to work harder, to take on larger projects, and to prove that his company could not only survive, but could thrive despite the efforts of those who wanted to see him fail. Thank you for staying with us this far in Thomas's incredible journey. Your engagement and your commitment to hearing his story mean everything to us, and we promise you that the best and most inspiring parts of his transformation are yet to come. What Thomas accomplished in the next phase of his business would not only secure his family's future, but would also provide opportunities for hundreds of other immigrants who were pursuing their own version of the American dream. Chapter 4. The year 1992 would prove to be the most pivotal year in Thomas Rodriguez's journey from poverty to prosperity, as he faced challenges that would either establish Rodriguez Construction as a major force in Detroit's construction industry, or would destroy everything he had built over 7 years of relentless work and sacrifice. The opportunity that would define Thomas's future came in the form of a phone call from the Detroit Public Schools, which was seeking contractors for a massive renovation project at Martin Luther King Jr. High School. The project involved updating the electrical systems, renovating classrooms, and rebuilding the gymnasium in a building that served over 2,000 students in one of Detroit's most challenging neighborhoods. The contract was worth $2 million, more money than Rodriguez Construction had generated in all of its previous projects combined. But the project also required a level of bonding and insurance that Thomas had never needed before, and it would require him to manage a crew of over 30 workers while coordinating with multiple subcontractors and city agencies. Elena, Thomas said as they reviewed the project specifications, this is the opportunity we've been working toward, but it's also the biggest risk we've ever faced. If we succeed, Rodriguez Construction becomes a major company. If we fail, we lose everything. Eleanor studied the financial requirements and project timeline with the analytical skills she had developed through her business education and 3 years of managing the company's finances. Thomas, the numbers work, but barely. We'll have to use all of our savings for the bonding requirements, and we'll have to establish credit lines that will strain our resources. But if we can complete this project successfully, it will open doors to government contracts that could sustain our company for decades. Thomas decided to bid on the Martin Luther King High School project, but he also understood that winning the contract would require more than just submitting the lowest price. The Detroit Public Schools had been burned by contractors who had submitted unrealistic bids and then failed to complete projects, so they were looking for companies that demonstrated not just competitive pricing, but also proven reliability and financial stability. The competition for the contract included some of Detroit's most established construction companies, firms that had been operating for decades and that had the resources and relationships that Rodriguez Construction was still developing. But Thomas had advantages that his competitors couldn't match: a reputation for completing projects on time and under budget, relationships with skilled workers who were committed to quality, and a level of personal attention to detail that larger companies couldn't provide. "Mr. Rodriguez," said Dr. Patricia Williams, the Detroit Public Schools Facilities Director, during Thomas's presentation, "Your company has an impressive track record, but this project is much larger than anything you've undertaken before. How can we be confident that you have the resources and expertise to handle work of this scope?" Thomas had prepared for this question by developing a detailed project management plan that demonstrated his understanding of the technical challenges and logistical requirements involved in the school renovation. But his most compelling argument was his personal commitment to the project and its importance to the community. Dr. Williams, this school serves the same kind of community where I grew up, and it serves the same kind of students that my daughter will be someday. I understand that these students deserve a learning environment that is safe, modern, and inspiring. Rodriguez Construction will treat this project not just as a business opportunity, but as a chance to give back to the community that has given us the opportunity to succeed. Rodriguez Construction was awarded the Martin Luther King High School contract in June 1992, and Thomas immediately understood that everything he had learned about construction and business management would be tested over the next 18 months. The project required him to coordinate the work of electricians, plumbers, carpenters, and specialty contractors while maintaining the school's operations and ensuring that students and teachers could continue their educational activities safely. But the real challenge came from competitors who were determined to see Rodriguez Construction fail. Within 2 weeks of starting work on the school project, Thomas began experiencing problems that seemed designed to sabotage his efforts. Materials deliveries were mysteriously delayed or delivered to wrong addresses. Workers who had committed to the project suddenly became unavailable, apparently after being offered higher wages by other contractors. Most seriously, city inspectors began finding problems with work that had previously passed inspection, requiring expensive corrections that threatened to eliminate any profit from the project. "Boss," said Miguel Santos, who had become Thomas's foreman, "these problems aren't accidents. Someone is trying to make sure we fail on this project." Thomas had reached the same conclusion, but he also understood that proving sabotage would be difficult, and that focusing on the harassment would distract him from the more important task of completing the project successfully. "Miguel, let them try to stop us. We're going to do this work so well that no inspector can find anything wrong with it, and we're going to finish ahead of schedule so that delays don't matter." Thomas's response to the sabotage attempts was to work harder and more carefully than he had ever worked before. He personally inspected every aspect of the construction work, ensuring that it exceeded code requirements and industry standards. He established relationships with multiple suppliers, ensuring that material delays from one source could be compensated by deliveries from others. Most importantly, he created a workplace culture that motivated his workers to take personal pride in the quality of their work. The Martin Luther King High School renovation became a showcase for Rodriguez Construction's capabilities and Thomas's leadership skills. The electrical work was completed to specifications that exceeded the original requirements, ensuring that the building's power systems would be adequate for decades of future technological upgrades. The classroom renovations included improvements that hadn't been included in the original contract, but that Thomas provided at no additional cost because he believed they were important for student safety and learning. But the project also tested Thomas's financial management skills, as cost overruns and payment delays threatened to bankrupt his company. The sabotage attempts had forced him to spend money on backup suppliers and additional inspections, while the Detroit Public Schools' bureaucratic payment procedures meant that invoices were often paid months after work was completed. "Thomas," Elena said during one of their weekly financial reviews, "we're running out of cash. If the school district doesn't pay our October invoice soon, we won't be able to make payroll or pay our suppliers." Thomas faced a decision that would define his character and his company's future. He could cut corners on the remaining work, reducing quality to preserve profit margins. He could reduce his crew and extend the project timeline, saving money but risking contract penalties. Or he could invest his personal savings and take on additional debt to ensure that the project was completed to the highest standards, regardless of the financial cost to his family. "Elena, we're going to finish this project the right way, even if it costs us everything we own. Rodriguez Construction's reputation is worth more than any amount of money, and these students deserve the best work we can provide." Thomas mortgaged his house and borrowed against his life insurance to provide the cash flow necessary to complete the school project. He worked 18-hour days, managing construction during the day and handling paperwork and planning at night. Elena took over all of the company's financial management while also caring for their young daughter and studying for her business degree. The Martin Luther King High School renovation was completed in December 1993, 2 months ahead of schedule, and with quality that exceeded every specification in the original contract. The project had cost Thomas nearly everything he owned, but it had also established Rodriguez Construction as one of Detroit's premier construction companies, and had proven that a Mexican immigrant could successfully manage projects of any size and complexity. "Mr. Rodriguez," Dr. Patricia Williams said during the project's completion ceremony, "this renovation has transformed our school and has provided our students with a learning environment that will serve them for decades. Rodriguez Construction has proven that excellence and integrity are still valued in the construction industry." But the real impact of the school project became apparent over the following months, as other government agencies and large private companies began offering contracts to Rodriguez Construction. The company's reputation for quality, reliability, and fair dealing had spread throughout Detroit's business community, and Thomas found himself being invited to bid on projects that would have been unimaginable just 5 years earlier. The success of the Martin Luther King High School project also attracted the attention of other minority contractors who were struggling to compete against established companies that had decades of experience and relationships. Thomas began receiving calls from Mexican-American, African-American, and Asian-American contractors who were seeking advice about business development and project management. "Thomas," said James Washington, the African-American carpenter who had worked on several Rodriguez construction projects, "you've proven that minority contractors can compete successfully against anyone. Would you be willing to help other minority-owned businesses learn how to bid on large projects and manage complex construction work?" Thomas realized that his success created opportunities not just for his own company, but also for other immigrant and minority entrepreneurs who were facing the same challenges and discrimination that he had overcome. He began serving as a mentor for other minority contractors, sharing the business knowledge and technical expertise that had enabled his success. But Thomas's greatest challenge was still ahead of him, the decision that would either secure his family's future forever or would cost him everything he had worked to achieve. Chapter 5. By 1995, Thomas Rodriguez had achieved a level of success that exceeded his most ambitious dreams when he had arrived in Detroit 10 years earlier as a penniless teenager who spoke no English. Rodriguez Construction employed over 50 workers, had annual revenues approaching $5 million, and was recognized as one of Detroit's most reliable and innovative construction companies. Thomas owned a comfortable home in one of the city's best neighborhoods. His daughter Maria was attending private school, and Elena had completed her business degree and had become a full partner in the company's operations. But Thomas's ultimate goal had always been more ambitious than simply building a successful small business. He wanted to create something permanent and significant, something that would provide opportunities for other immigrants and would demonstrate that the American dream was still achievable for people who were willing to work for it. The opportunity to achieve that goal came in the form of the most ambitious project in Detroit's recent history: the renovation of the historic Michigan Central Station. The magnificent train station that had been abandoned for over a decade and had become a symbol of the city's economic decline. The project would involve converting the massive building into a mixed-use development that included office space, retail shops, and residential units, work that would require over $50 million in investment and would take 5 years to complete. The Michigan Central Station project was being organized by a consortium of investors that included some of Detroit's most prominent business leaders, and they were seeking a construction company that could handle the technical challenges and logistical complexity of renovating a building that was larger than most city blocks and that had been deteriorating for years. "Elena," Thomas said as they reviewed the project specifications, "this is the opportunity we've been building toward. If Rodriguez Construction can be selected as the primary contractor for Michigan Central Station, we'll become one of the largest construction companies in Michigan." Elena studied the financial requirements and technical specifications with the careful attention that had made her an invaluable partner in the company's growth. The project would require Rodriguez Construction to post bonds worth over $10 million, to manage a workforce of over 300 people, and to coordinate with dozens of subcontractors and specialty firms. "Thomas, the numbers are staggering, but I think we can do it. We have the technical expertise, we have the management systems, and we have the reputation for quality and reliability. The question is whether the investors will trust a company that was started by a Mexican immigrant to handle the most important construction project in Detroit's recent history." Thomas understood that winning the Michigan Central Station contract would require more than just demonstrating technical competence and competitive pricing. He would have to convince investors and city officials that Rodriguez Construction had the financial resources, management capabilities, and long-term commitment necessary to complete a project of unprecedented scope and complexity. The competition for the Michigan Central Station contract included several of the largest construction companies in the Midwest, firms with decades of experience in major commercial projects and established relationships with the investors and government agencies involved in the project. But Thomas had built Rodriguez Construction's reputation on the principle that no project was too challenging if it was approached with adequate preparation, attention to detail, and personal commitment to excellence. Thomas spent 6 months preparing his proposal for the Michigan Central Station project, developing detailed plans for every aspect of the construction work and assembling a team of specialists who could handle the unique challenges of renovating a historic building of such massive scale. He also assembled financial documentation that demonstrated Rodriguez Construction's stability and growth trajectory, proving that the company had the resources necessary to complete such an ambitious undertaking. "Mr. Rodriguez," said William Harrison, the lead investor in the Michigan Central Station project, during Thomas's final presentation, "your proposal is impressive, and your company's track record speaks for itself. But this project will be under intense public scrutiny, and any problems or delays will reflect not just on Rodriguez Construction, but on everyone involved in the development. Are you prepared for that level of pressure and responsibility?" Thomas looked at the panel of investors and city officials who would decide the future of his company and answered with the confidence that had carried him from the garbage trucks of Detroit to the boardrooms of the city's business elite. "Mr. Harrison, I came to America with nothing but a willingness to work hard and a belief that this country rewards people who are committed to excellence. Rodriguez Construction has built its reputation by completing every project on time, under budget, and better than our customers expected. The Michigan Central Station project will be the most visible demonstration of those principles, and it will prove that immigrant-owned businesses can contribute to Detroit's economic revitalization. Rodriguez Construction was awarded the Michigan Central Station contract in January 1996, making Thomas Rodriguez the first Mexican-American to serve as primary contractor on a major commercial development in Detroit's history. The announcement generated significant media attention, with some commentators praising the selection as evidence of Detroit's commitment to diversity and economic opportunity, while others questioned whether an immigrant-owned company could handle such a complex and high-profile project. But Thomas had prepared for both the celebration and the skepticism by building a company that was committed to excellence rather than publicity. The Michigan Central Station renovation began with the same attention to detail and personal commitment that had characterized every Rodriguez construction project, from Mrs. O'Brien's bathroom to the Martin Luther King High School renovation. The project's first phase involved stabilizing the building's structure and addressing decades of deterioration caused by weather, vandalism, and neglect. The work required specialized engineering expertise and historical preservation techniques that challenged every member of Rodriguez Construction's technical team. But it also provided an opportunity to demonstrate the company's capabilities on a scale that was visible to the entire city. "Boss," said Miguel Santos, who had become Rodriguez Construction's chief superintendent, "this building is like a patient that's been sick for 20 years. Every day, we discover new problems that weren't in the original plans, but every day we also discover that this building was built to last forever, and we have a chance to bring it back to life." The Michigan Central Station renovation became a symbol of Detroit's economic recovery and a showcase for Rodriguez Construction's technical expertise and project management capabilities. The work attracted attention from construction industry publications, urban planning experts, and government officials who were interested in historic preservation and urban redevelopment. But for Thomas, the project's most important impact was the opportunities it created for other immigrant and minority workers who had previously been excluded from major construction projects. Rodriguez Construction's workforce for the Michigan Central Station project included workers from Mexico, El Salvador, Poland, Lebanon, and African American workers from Detroit's neighborhoods, creating a multicultural team that reflected the diversity of the city itself. "Thomas," said Elena during one of their evening walks through the construction site, "you've created something that's bigger than just a construction company. You've created opportunities for people who never thought they would have a chance to work on a project like this." The Michigan Central Station renovation was completed in 2001, 5 years ahead of the original schedule and $15 million under budget. The project had transformed one of Detroit's most visible symbols of economic decline into a vibrant, mixed-use development that attracted businesses, residents, and tourists to the city's downtown area. More importantly for Thomas, the project had established Rodriguez Construction as one of Michigan's largest and most respected construction companies. By 2005, the company employed over 2,000 workers, had annual revenues exceeding $500 million, and was involved in major projects throughout the Midwest. But Thomas's success had never been measured solely in financial terms. He had also created the Thomas Rodriguez Foundation, which provided scholarships for immigrant students and business development assistance for minority-owned companies. The foundation had helped hundreds of young people attend college and had provided startup funding for dozens of immigrant entrepreneurs who were pursuing their own version of the American dream. "Dad," said Maria Rodriguez, who had grown up watching her father build his empire and who was now a civil engineer working for Rodriguez Construction, "you've proven that the American dream still exists for people who are willing to work for it. But more importantly, you've shown that success creates a responsibility to help others achieve their own dreams." Thomas looked at his daughter, understanding that his greatest achievement wasn't the size of his company or the wealth he had accumulated, but the example he had provided for his children and for other immigrants who were seeking opportunities in America. Today, at 75 years old, Thomas Rodriguez continues to serve as chairman of Rodriguez Construction, while Elena manages the company's daily operations and Maria leads the engineering division. The company has completed major projects in 12 states and employs workers from over 30 countries, creating a multicultural workforce that reflects Thomas's belief that talent and determination are more important than background or nationality. Rodriguez Construction has built hospitals, schools, office buildings and residential developments that house thousands of families and provide services for millions of people. But Thomas is most proud of the fact that over 60 former Rodriguez construction workers have started their own construction companies, creating a network of immigrant and minority-owned businesses that continue to provide opportunities for people who are pursuing their own American dreams. Thomas Rodriguez's story proves that the American dream is not a guarantee, but an opportunity that requires courage, determination, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. His journey from garbage collector to construction industry leader demonstrates that in America, it truly doesn't matter where you come from, but where you're willing to go. His story also proves that success creates a responsibility to help others achieve their own dreams. Thomas has used his wealth and influence to provide opportunities for thousands of immigrants and minority workers, ensuring that his success would create pathways for others rather than simply enriching himself. Most importantly, Thomas Rodriguez's story shows that the most meaningful achievements are not measured in dollars or recognition, but in the impact they have on other people's lives. Every building that Rodriguez Construction has erected stands as a monument not just to engineering and construction skills, but to the power of hard work, integrity, and the belief that America still offers unlimited opportunities for people who are willing to pursue them. Thomas often tells young immigrants who seek his advice, America doesn't promise you success, but it promises you the opportunity to earn success through your own efforts. The question is not whether you will face obstacles and discrimination, but whether you will let those challenges defeat you or use them as motivation to work harder and achieve more than anyone thought possible. Until his life stands as proof that with enough determination any dream is achievable and that the greatest success comes not from what you accumulate for yourself, but from what you create for others. What would you have done in Thomas's situation? Would you have had the courage to risk everything you had worked for to pursue an even greater opportunity? Would you have been willing to use your success to help others achieve their own dreams, even when it required significant personal sacrifice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of determination and success inspired you, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming stories of ordinary people who achieved extraordinary things through hard work and perseverance. And don't forget to watch our next recommended video, where we return to stories of impossible challenges as we explore how some people push the limits of human endurance and capability in ways that seem to defy possibility.